Hey there, Parker Reed here, and welcome to PR Media, your home for everything movies and music through my eyes. And today we have another entry in the franchise's ranked series, and today we're going to look at the Dark Knight Trilogy. The Dark Knight Trilogy is 3 films directed by Mr. Christopher Nolan, and of course it's about the one and only comic book hero, Batman. And this series of films really changed the superhero genre for the better, and even changed Batman films for the better. Because prior to this, Batman had become largely a joke in the film world because the Joel Schumacher films, the latest being Batman and Robin, really made him a comic book character in the worst sense. It was a lot of neon, a lot of bright colors, and a lot of one-liners, and it really wasn't what Batman was if you looked at the comic books and the source material. So Christopher Nolan, starting with 2005's Batman Begins, set a new tone, a more realistic world, except once you get to the third film, but we'll get into that later. So I want to take a look at these 3 films. They've been out for almost a decade. So let's take a look at the Dark Knight Trilogy. Coming in at number 3, and my least favorite of the Dark Knight Trilogy, we have The Dark Knight Rises, the finale. There's a lot to enjoy about this movie, don't get me wrong. Tom Hardy's Bane is a great villain, and towards the end there's a lot of great action, and there is a lot to be had as far as narrative goes. But the gaping plot holes in this movie just take me completely out of it. For example, when Bruce Wayne gets out of the prison after jumping and finally getting out, how does he get back when he has no money, no plane, and how does he get back into Gotham? That makes no sense because there was no bridges and there was heavily armed guards everywhere. So I don't know how he got back in undetected, how he got his suit back or any of his gadgets. I didn't understand that. They never explain it. And it was pretty much just chock full of, well, who cares? It's a superhero movie. But when there's plot holes that big, it's hard to ignore. And also, it was probably my favorite shot in all 3 of these movies was when you can see the bat symbol on one of the buildings burning. But how did he do that? One, how would you logistically do that? And 2, why would he take all that time to do that when people were in peril and about to fall under ice and be killed? That felt like a poor use of your time, Batman. You got to improve it there. So those 2 things are some of the things I don't really enjoy about The Dark Knight Rises. But overall, it's a good ending to the trilogy. Not a great one, and I think the ambiguous ending was a good one. Some people wanted a little bit more definition. I took it more of a metaphorical ending. I don't know if he stayed alive or not. It's still up for debate whether Alfred was imagining him at the diner in Paris or not. But overall, The Dark Knight Rises is not my favorite in the trilogy by any means, but it's still a solid film. And it showed just how you can kind of stick the landing, but when the first 2 films in this franchise were so great and so classic, what are you going to do? Now, right in the middle of the pack as far as the Dark Knight Trilogy goes is 2005's Batman Begins, the movie that started it all. And this is the best Batman origin story we've seen yet. Sure, 1989's Batman was great, and of course the original series, and Batman v Superman, but that didn't happen yet. And that really wasn't even an origin story. So Batman Begins took a more grounded approach to Bruce Wayne and Batman. It showed just how alone he felt and how he was trying to confront his fears after falling down the well and being confronted by bats. They were a manifestation of his fear, and that's why he became Batman. It showed just how angry he was at the person who killed his parents when he brings a gun to the courtroom and thinks about killing the guy who did it, but ends up not doing that because of his moral character, eventually contributing to his one rule of no killing. And Batman Begins is realistic until we get to the last scene with Scarecrow and in the city where they're releasing all the gas. It was very much 1989 Joker releasing gas through the balloons. So that part's a little bit hard to get behind, but Christian Bale is fantastic as Batman. When his origin story is starting in this film and he's confronting criminals and making a name for himself, you really feel just the reality of the situation. It doesn't feel like a comic book movie. It feels like this could happen. It feels like some rich billionaire with a lot of resources and a lot of pent-up aggression and demons could do this late at night and feel like he's justifying himself. So overall, Batman Begins, it's a fantastic film. It looks great still. Thank you, Christopher Nolan, for shooting all 3 of these movies in 8K, so when they did the 4K releases, it still looks good. A lot of directors can learn from that. And you can really see the passion he has for the character in this film. There's a fun cameo from a character you'll see later. Remember King Joffrey from Game of Thrones, the kid we all hated? He's a little kid in this film. Batman saves him. So maybe there's a little crossover. A man can hope. But overall, Batman Begins, I think, is the second best in the Dark Knight Trilogy. And you know what that means. Number one in the Dark Knight Trilogy is, of course, the namesake 2008's The Dark Knight. There's a reason this movie was the number one at the box office after it came out, because it's one of the best films ever made. Not just superhero movies, not just action movies, not just thrillers. It is one of the best movies ever made. And it features one of the best performances by a villain ever, which is Heath Ledger's The Joker. I mean, there's so many quotes you can pull from this movie, and it's drenched in classic imagery, like the Joker first appearing in the opening scene. And Batman, and throughout this film, is just playing catch-up. He feels like he's one step behind the entire time because the Joker is coming from a perspective that Batman's never seen. He just wants to watch the world burn rather than going anything logical like money. One of the big issues people have with this trilogy is the voice that Christian Bale tries to portray for Batman, because he's trying to mask his voice, because that'd be an easy way to kind of link back to him, because he is a well-known figure and his voice is recognizable. So the whole time he's like, Rachel! He sounds like he has a breathing problem the whole time. But I think it's intimidating and it's fun to watch. It's fun to imitate. I mean, we can have some fun with it, right? You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Harvey Dent. Can we trust him? It's really fun to imitate his voice. And it works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, so you can either take it or leave it, but I enjoy it. And the theater in my area decided to re-show this film recently. And going and seeing it again, I was the only one in the theater because COVID-19 is still kicking everyone's ass and people don't feel safe going out yet. But The Dark Knight is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's the best in the Dark Knight trilogy by a long shot, and that's not to discredit the other two films. There's a reason The Dark Knight is so iconic, and people take it for granted. And there's a reason it made superhero movies take a darker tone going forward. The Dark Knight, number one in the Dark Knight Trilogy, and it is one of the greatest films of all time. My name is Parker Reed, and you have watched PR Media. Remember to keep supporting physical media, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.